Thank you for watching Amit Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnam. I am thankful to all news resources and my team for their cooperation. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, African, Asian channels and also the news agencies, Reuters, AFP, AP. Now the news in detail. Rather news headlines. Fear become reality. Iran has launched missiles, drones for Israel. Whole world is watching this escalation with fear. Arizona court abortion ruling and the Republican Party strategy. First African American who played the PGA Tour. Iran captured Israeli ship in Persian Gulf. Israeli settlers attacked Palestinians in West Bank. Stabbing spree in Sydney, Australia caused 6 deaths. Russia and Ukraine accuse each other for killing civilians. Cable car rescue efforts in Turkey. Rainstorm in eastern US. Drugs shortages in United States. Canadian police force in crisis. Now the news in detail.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, a region on edge. Israel is on high alert tonight as the nation awaits an attack from Iran. Then, after Arizona's High Court revives a near-total abortion ban, how Republicans are navigating the political fallout. And with the world's top golfers competing at the Masters tournament this weekend, a look back at the first African-American to play on the PGA Tour.
It was a rough life, but he was strong and determined. And, he wasn't going to let anybody stop him from doing what he wanted to do.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by Certified Financial Planner Professionals are proud to support PBS News Weekend. CFP professionals are committed to acting in their clients' best interest. More information at letsmakeaplan.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the News Hour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. Tonight, Iran's much-anticipated attack on Israel is unfolding, slowly. Israeli Army spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari says dozens of drones have been launched from Iran and were most recently seen over northeastern Iraq. Officials say the drones won't arrive in Israel for several hours. Israel's been on high alert for days. Military defenses have been beefed up. Israeli airspace is now closed, and officials close schools for tomorrow, the beginning of the Israeli school week. In Washington, President Biden cut short a weekend at his Delaware Beach home. He returned to the White House to meet with national security officials. U.S. and Israeli intelligence have been warning for days that Iran was preparing an attack. They say it was in retaliation for a suspected Israeli strike on an Iranian diplomatic building in Syria, which killed senior Iranian generals. Against this backdrop, Iranian special forces seized a cargo ship indirectly owned by an Israeli-born billionaire. Iran said it was taking the ship to their territorial waters. A Mideast defense official shared cell phone video appearing to show commandos rappelling from a helicopter. The ship's operator says it has a crew of 25. It happened in the Strait of Hormuz, which connects the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. On Friday, the ship had been seen off the coast of Dubai. Israel says it's an act of piracy and has called for sanctions. And tensions were high on the West Bank. The Israeli army found the body of a missing 14-year-old Israeli boy who the military said was the victim of a terrorist attack. It was his disappearance that sent Israeli settlers rampaging through Palestinian villages yesterday, setting homes on fire, killing a Palestinian man, and wounding more than 24 others. The unrest continued today, and Israel has sent more troops to the area. In Australia, a lone attacker stabbed 6 people to death at a popular Sydney shopping centre. 8 others were injured, some critically. They included a 9-month-old baby who required surgery. Police shot the attacker dead. It triggered chaos among the shoppers. Hundreds fled and sought shelter outside. Eyewitnesses say the attacker appeared to target people indiscriminately.
All I heard was put it down, and then she shot him, but we were not even. She didn't shoot him. Well, he would have kept going. He was on the rampage. He was on the rampage.
Authorities say it was an isolated incident not related to terrorism. In southeastern Ukraine, more than a dozen people have died as Russian troops escalate their assaults across the east. Russia says Ukrainian shelling has killed at least 10 people, some of them children, in Russian-occupied territory near Zaporizhia. Ukraine says Russian attacks killed at least 3 civilians elsewhere in the country. And in the mountains of southern Turkey, all 174 people stranded in dangling cable cars for nearly a day have been rescued. The ordeal began Friday when a cable car struck a pole and burst open, sending the passengers to the rocks below, killing one of them and injuring 7. It happened just outside the resort city of Antalya during a busy Eid holiday week. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, the story of Charlie Sifford, the first golfer to break the PGA's color barrier, and a brief but spectacular take on the miracle of flight.
This is PBS News Weekend from WETA Studios in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
The near total abortion ban that the Arizona Supreme Court revived this week dates back to when Arizona wasn't a state yet, when slavery was legal and when only white men had the vote. Many Republican office holders and candidates scrambled to distance themselves from the law. It underscores some of the political consequences of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to strike down the constitutional right to seek an abortion and leave it up to the states to decide whether to regulate it. Barrett Marson is a Republican strategist based in Arizona. Before we get going, Mr. Marson, I think we should make clear to the viewers you're not working for any candidates on the ballot this fall.
No, I am not. And thanks a lot for having me on, John.
Thanks. In Arizona, it's a swing state in the presidential election. You got a toss-up Senate race, and you got a couple of congressional contests that are going to be very close. How is this, what happened this week, the Supreme Court decision, going to affect those races?
Well, I think, you said it all in that sentence there, except for that was what was last week. This week now, I don't know if the Senate race is a toss-up anymore. I don't know. I think last week we were a lean Trump state, and I think this week we're a lean Biden state. I think Kari Lake is on the wrong end of this issue, and in fact, I think a lot of Republicans who have, quite frankly, championed this kind of thing for, 2 generations, are finding themselves, at least in Arizona, on the wrong side of how voters feel about this issue.
Have the Democrats picked up on this? Are they pressing this?
I mean, that is what they are doing 24/7. And rightly so. I mean, look, right now, again, a week ago, I would have said the border and immigration and the economy and inflation were absolutely not only the top 2 issues, but they were very much Republican issues. And now I think abortion is the #1 and prevailing issue. It is the issue that will take the oxygen out of the room for any other issue. So you will see abortion be front and center in every time Democrats open their mouths on the campaign stump. And Republicans right now just don't have an answer for that.
You mentioned Kari Lake. She's running for the Senate this time. 2 years ago, when she was running for governor, she called this law a great law. And you've also mentioned other candidates and office holders who have been championing this law or this idea and now have to deal with it. How should they deal with it? How can they deal with it?
Well, look, it's been dogma in the Republican Party for, again, 2 generations, 3 generations. So I think, frankly, just own it. Talk about why you are pro-life. Talk about the benefits. Talk about the need maybe for more of a social safety net, but talk about the benefits of being pro-life, because there is no really running away. And otherwise, just like Kari Lake, you look like a massive flip-flopper. And 2 years ago, she called this the model for other states, and now she's talking about she's pro-choice. So. I think a Republican candidate should just own this. They've been wanting to do this for a couple generations. They've done it, celebrate it, and embrace it.
To that point, and you also mentioned this has been Republican dogma. They got it. They got what they wanted when Roe was overturned. Is this sort of like the dog that caught the car? They don't know what to do with it now?
Well, it's certainly in Arizona, where the electorate is at least willing to have some sort of legal abortion, whether it is we will have an initiative on the ballot most likely, and that would allow abortion up to 24 weeks. And I think that will pass maybe now with 60+% of the vote, especially if it is a choice between 0 abortions and maybe something a little bit too far to the left, but better something that's legal than nothing.
Florida, of course, finds itself in a similar situation. The Supreme Court cleared the way for a 6-week ban to take effect at the beginning of May. They've got, or likely to have, a constitutional ballot initiative on their ballot as well. Is it going to have the same effect there, or do you think it's different?
Well, Florida is has been trending Republican for sure. But again, this ballot initiative has the chance, both in Arizona and Florida, to bring out so many young people, so many first-time voters, and we don't know whether they will stick around, come out for the abortion initiative, but stick around for Joe Biden and Ruben Gallego and, and Senate candidates and House candidates down the ballot. Certainly they're going to come out for the abortion initiative, and it'll be up to the Democratic candidates up and down the ballot to convince them to stick around and vote for them as well.
Republican strategist Barrett Marson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On this weekend of the Masters Golf Tournament, a look at the man Tiger Woods has called the Jackie Robinson of our sport. Charlie Sifford was the first black player to get a PGA card, qualifying him for the Professional Golf Tour. It came in 1961, a full decade after the color barrier had fallen in professional football, baseball, and basketball. Charlie Sifford cut a distinctive figure on the fairways. That cigar jam between his teeth was more than just a trademark. He said it helped him with his swing and putting. For most of his professional career, he played not on the PGA Tour, but on the UGA, the United Golfers Association. Black players called it the Chitlin Tour, formed for those not welcome in the all-white PGA. In 1961, the PGA finally dropped its Caucasian-only bylaw, which has been in place since 1934. Prompted by a chance meeting with Sifford, the California Attorney General had threatened to sue the group. Sifford was 42, his prime playing days behind him. Still, he went on to win 2 PGA tournaments, the 1967 Greater Hartford Open and the 1969 Los Angeles Open. In 2006, his achievements in golf were recognized with an honorary doctorate from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, home to what's considered to be the world's oldest golf course. Just months before Sifford died in 2015 at the age of 92, President Barack Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian award.
On the tour, Charlie was sometimes banned from clubhouse restaurants. Folks threatened him, shouted slurs from the gallery, kicked his ball into the rough. Charlie's laughing about that. My ball's always in the rough. And because golf can be a solitary sport, Charlie didn't have teammates to lean on. But he did have his lovely wife, Rose. And he had plenty of guts and grit and that trademark cigar. And Charlie won on the tour twice, both after the age of 45. But it was never just about the wins. As Charlie says, I wasn't just trying to do this for me, I was trying to do it for the world.
Sifford played in 12 U.S. Opens, 6 PGA championships, and was the first black player inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame. But he never played at the Masters, which he once called the most redneck tournament in the country. Sports writer Peter May has written a new book about Sifford and the California Attorney General who pressed the PGA to act. It's called Changing the Course, How Charlie Sifford and Stanley Mosk Integrated the PGA. And Charles Sifford Jr. is Charlie Sifford's elder son. Mr. Sifford, I'd like to start with you. Your father, of course, is a legend in golf, but he was also your father. He was your dad. What are your memories of him as a man and as your dad?
You know, my father was gone a lot, playing golf, but I knew while he wasn't at home, you know, he was doing what he loved to do, and that was play golf. That was his dream. That's the thing that, you know, he wanted to do ever since he was 11 years old. And
when he was home, did he talk about the frustrations and what he was going through trying to get into the PGA?
When he first started, all he wanted, you know, he was just a game. He wanted to be able to play his best and play against the best, but he wasn't allowed to do that. You know, he had death threats and a lot of other things going on. People called him and told him not to come to the golf course. They called him names. It just showed me, you know, he was a special person, you know, because everybody just couldn't play as good a golf as they did and be under that kind of pressure.
And Peter, in the book, you detail some of that, some of the hardships that he went through, but also, despite those hardships, the performance on the course.
Yeah, I mean, he would go to tournaments and he'd be forced to change clothes in the parking lot, eat in the parking lot. There were things that were thrown in his way virtually every tournament he played in, south of the Basin-Dixon line. And Charles is right about that. It had to take a certain type of individual to be able to put up with it, but not to overreact. And he was that guy. He was the perfect guy for that moment. He had death threats, as he said. He was called the N-word. That's what he had to go through.
I remember you talking about the writing about the Greensboro Open one year,
right,
where he got a lot of heckling from the galleries, but he still shot a really good round.
Yes, he did. The Greater Greensboro Open was the first tournament south of the Mason-Dixon line that a black player played in. And he played extremely well the first day. He got a death threat call at the house he was staying at the second day, and he finally had to move. He ended up, I think, tied for 6th or 5th. It was as good a performance, I think, as he could have ever delivered, given all the other stuff that was going on.
And Mr. Sifford, you say he didn't talk about that at all. Do you get the sense he was trying to shield you, trying to protect you from that?
Yeah, he did. I've heard him talking to my mom, and that's how I found out about a lot of the things. He never really talked to me one-on-one about what happened. Every now and then I was able to, you know, get a hold of the newspaper and read different things. It was a rough life, but he was strong and determined. And, you know, he wasn't going to let anybody stop him from doing what he wanted to do.
Peter, I was surprised to read in the book that it was actually in the PGA bylaws that it was for golfers of the Caucasian race. How did it get ended?
It got ended thanks to the other partner in the story, Stanley Mosk, the Attorney General of California. He heard about it from Charlie. He was introduced to Charlie at a country club in Los Angeles by Billy Eckstein, the great singer and band leader who championed Charlie's cause for a number of years. When Charlie Sifford told Stanley Mosk about this, Stanley Mosk was incredulous. And he didn't know anything about golf. He didn't know anything about Charlie Sifford other than that he was a golfer. But he went to work, and it took him about a year and a half to 2 years to finally, you know, beat the PGA over the head enough times that they figured out that they better change it.
Threatened it with lawsuits.
Threatened him with lawsuits. Threatened to stop the tournaments in California from happening. So yeah, he was a big part of all this.
And Mr. Sifford, of all the honors that your father got, one of them was the first black man inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame. Peter describes that induction ceremony in the book. It sounds like an incredibly emotional event. What do you remember from that night?
The first thing I remember is my wife and I, we stayed up for about a week writing and rewriting his speech. And we had it done in big print because he was having trouble with his eyes at that time. And when he got up on stage, he was so emotional that his eyes started watering, and he couldn't see the pages of the speech, so he just started talking, you know, from his heart. And I think the biggest laugh he got was when he was telling everybody that when he got the phone call, he made sure he was going to get there to the hall for the induction. He slowed down in his driving, and he was careful crossing the streets because he didn't want to take a chance of missing the opportunity to go into the Hall of Fame.
One thing you do note in the book is that after Charlie Sifford broke down this barrier, there was not an influx of black golfers into the PGA. Today, I think there are only probably about 4 black professional golfers. Why do you think that is?
It's still a white player's game. It's a country club game. That's where all the golfers go to get lessons and play on good courses. And it's not a game that has really embraced blacks as much as they should. There hasn't been the movement that Charlie and Tiger both hoped would happen. It hasn't happened.
Mr. Sifford, you're an amateur golfer. Are you frustrated by that there aren't more in the game?
Yes, I'm sure, and my father would be too. He was still alive. One of the main reasons, you know, it's just an expensive sport. You had to buy clubs, you had to pay to go play the game. A lot of the blacks that got into the game back in the time when my father was playing started off caddying, so they were able to learn the game by watching other people play. With the invention of the cart, that eliminated the caddy positions for the most part, so that eliminated the exposure that the young blacks have to play the game. It's starting to get a little bit better, you know, with HBCU schools having some strong golf teams. The tournaments are starting to develop where they can play in and get exposure, and they're getting good instructions now, which they never had when they were, back in the day.
Mr. Sifford, obviously your father has this great legacy as the man who broke the color barrier. As his son, as other members of your family, your children, his grandchildren, what would you hope that his legacy would be?
That they remember him being a strong-willed individual who set a goal and worked to achieve that goal, you know, and did it in the right way. You know, he was a pioneer. He didn't consider himself a civil rights leader. You know, he didn't think of himself that way. He was just trying to make it easier for the people coming up behind him to be able to have a better opportunity to play the game.
Charles Sifford Jr., Peter May, thank you both very much.
My pleasure.
My pleasure.
Derek Fennell is an entrepreneur, an author, and for more than 14 years, a flight attendant. Many of his passengers know Derek for his in-flight poems reflecting on his time in the skies. Tonight, Derek shares one of his poems and his brief but spectacular take on the miracle of flight.
I've been a flight attendant for 14 years. We're all used to the flight attendant. Make sure that you have all your bags underneath the chair in front of you. Make sure your seatbelt is buckled. Make sure your seat back is upright. How many times have you heard a poem at 36,000 feet? Today again we fly. We enjoy the energy of the people at the port, the hustle and bustle and excitement of going without thought. Moving from city to city amongst the skies, observing the beauty of nature as we fly. People from all around the world we meet, sharing unique and interesting conversations as we speak. Seeing their smiles again without a mask, we begin to realize just how much COVID-19 has put us all through a task. Today again we fly. Clear the clothes and ready to go we shout as we bring the world together without a doubt. Up, up and away we go as the mighty jet engines begin to roar. Today again we fly. Cruising at 36,000 feet. And our office with wings and special guests such as you can't be beat. Yeah, that's right. 36,000 feet. Where the air is thin and only for those who can handle the heat. Today again we fly. I usually say this poem as we're making our final descent. The enjoyment that I get from the humanity of sharing that poem with everyone is when they break out into an applause. It's just an amazing feeling just to find that people really appreciate it that much. If all I do is serve you a drink, you had a really good flight, because what I'm trained for, you don't want to see it. My name is Derek Fennell, and this is my brief but spectacular take on the miracle of flight.
Now on the PBS NewsHour YouTube channel, the latest episode of PBS News Weekly. Ali Rogan covers the biggest political stories of the week, including President Biden's plans to eliminate more student loan debt and Arizona's abortion ban. All that and more is on the PBS NewsHour YouTube channel. And that is PBS News Weekend for this Saturday. On Sunday, we'll have the very latest on the Iranian attack on Israel. I'm John Yang. For all of my colleagues, thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by
Consumer Cellular, this is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket. Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular, you get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing. Have a nice day.
Certified Financial Planner professionals are proud to support PBS News Weekend. CFP professionals are committed to acting in their clients' best interest. More information at letsmakeaplan.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions.
On this Saturday night, attacks from the air and on the waters. Iran strikes Israel with drones and seizes a cargo ship near the Persian Gulf.
It's one of the most dangerous times between Israel and Iran in recent history.
As tensions soar between the two nations, Canadians are now being warned to avoid all travel to that region.
He was on the rampage. He was on the rampage.
A man with a knife kills 6 people and injures 8, including a baby at a Sydney shopping mall. Mid-air rescue mission. Dozens more finally touched ground after a fatal cable car crash in Turkey. And a long-awaited reward for some gold medal champions.
Global National with RNSO. Reporting tonight, Tracy Tong.
Sirens and explosions over the old city of Jerusalem and across Israel tonight as a barrage of drones and missiles launched hours ago finally arrives, being intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome system, with U.S. defense forces in the region also confirming they are shooting down drones as well. Whoever harms us, we will harm them, warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier tonight. He says an offensive response to strike back at Iran is on the table. And tonight, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also spoke about the attack, condemning Iran's actions.
Canada unequivocally condemns Iran's airborne attacks against Israel. We stand with Israel. The Iranian regime's latest actions will further destabilize the region and make lasting peace more difficult.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Iran's permanent mission to the UN says the attack is a response to Israel's strike on an Iranian consulate in Syria, and that the matter can be deemed concluded, warning of further action if the Israeli regime makes another mistake. The barrage of missiles and drones follows days of threats by Iran's top officials, including its supreme leader, of a retaliatory strike against Israel that has left the country and the world on edge. There have also been reports of rockets being launched by Yemen and Lebanon. And earlier today, even before the drone attack, a group of Iranian military commandos stormed an Israeli-affiliated container ship near the Strait of Hormuz, seizing the ship. Mackenzie Gray has the latest in our top story.
It's set to be the first of many attacks from Iran. This cargo ship they allege is linked to Israel, seized by the Revolutionary Guard. And the Iranian drone attack, the U.S.'s warning, will likely unfold over several hours. Previously, an American official told CBS News, Iran could potentially use more than 100 drones, 150 cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles for long-range military strikes inside Israel. Retaliation, nearly 2 weeks after a suspected Israeli bombing on an Iranian consulate in Syria, killed several top Iranian military officials, leading Iran's supreme leader to warn Israel will be punished.
The Israel Defense Forces prepared for all scenarios, and we will take the necessary steps, together with our allies, to protect the people of Israel.
Allies like the U.S. have warned Iran not to attack, but have rushed warships and other military assets to the region. President Joe Biden also rushed back to the White House this afternoon to consult with his national security team. The attack, a tactical mistake from Tehran in the eyes of NATO's former supreme commander.
You know, Iran has to feel like they're kind of winning right now. They've got the United States and Israel at odds. Hamas has survived. You've got the whole world down on the Israelis for what's going on in Gaza. If this was part of the plan, this was the plan from the beginning.
The bigger concern, the possibility of any Iranian attack expanding the current Israel-Hamas war outside of Gaza.
If there's a significant mass casualty event inside Israel, then I think the possibility of escalation is very, very high.
Countries, including Canada, told their citizens not to travel to Israel because of a potential Iranian attack, Tracy, that looks like it's just started.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa for us. Thank you, Mackenzie. And there is a heightened state of alert not far from Israel's border in the neighboring West Bank. These images capturing what's being described by Palestinians as a rampage, apparently the largest since the war in Gaza began. Israeli settlers near Ramallah burning dozens of homes and cars in a number of small communities. It all started after a 14-year-old Israeli boy went missing. His body was found today. One Palestinian is dead in the skirmishes, 25 others injured. In Turkey, more than 180 people have now been rescued after a deadly cable car accident near the resort Mediterranean city of Antalya. A massive rescue operation was triggered Friday night after a cable car cabin collided with a broken pole, sending it crashing to the ground. One person was killed, 17 others injured, while dozens were left stranded. Officials say some 600 personnel took part in daring rescue efforts. A preliminary report suggests there was corrosion and damage to the cable car's rolling system. 13 people connected to the companies in charge of running and repairing the system have been detained. To Australia now, where at least 6 people are dead after a stabbing rampage inside a Sydney shopping mall. It happened at the Westfield Shopping Centre in Bondi Junction, in the city's eastern suburbs. Police say the lone suspect had no clear motive or ideology and was eventually shot dead by a female officer, being hailed a hero. Catherine Urquhart reports on the indiscriminate attack and what more we know about the killer.
It was a chaotic scene inside Sydney's Westfield Bondi Junction shopping centre, where a mass stabbing happened just after 3 p.m.
I was running, but it was insane. It was insanity. I wasn't expecting it.
Terrified shoppers described the suspect as he walked through the mall.
We saw the guy come up the escalators, green shirt, I think shorts, with a big black knife in his hand. And just really calmly, he was just walking like he was having an ice cream in the park.
Video captured the moments a man confronted the 40-year-old attacker.
We saw all these people running towards us, and then we heard a shot.
That shot, fired by a female police officer, killed the suspect.
As she continued to walk quickly behind him to catch up with him, he turned, faced her, raised a knife. She discharged a firearm, and that person is now deceased.
There were desperate efforts to save victims. Among those killed, a mother whose 9-month-old baby was injured.
Baby in the stretcher going into the ambulance, and now I know it's a 9-month-old with a bandage of the arm and in the belly, and he was like not awake.
As first responders secured the crime scene and tended to victims, police said they didn't believe it was a terror attack.
We know a little bit about this person, but as I said, we're waiting to confirm his identification.
Australia's Prime Minister praised the heroics of everyday people who were there.
And yet for these Australians, their first instinct in the face of danger was to help someone else. That is what we hold on to tonight as Australians.
Almost all of the victims are women, but it's unclear if that's why they were targeted. A motive for the horrifying attack remains undetermined. Catherine Urquhart, Global News, Vancouver.
An Ontario man who suffered a medical emergency in Costa Rica says he feels stranded abroad. His family is working to bring him back. The challenge now, a lack of available beds here at home. Sean O'Shea reports.
For Emma Rice, the waiting game continues.
There really isn't much you can do other than advocate and be persistent.
The Toronto area woman's father, Grant, a 69-year-old from Eastern Ontario, lies in a hospital room in San Jose, Costa Rica. He's on a ventilator. Rice became seriously ill while traveling for the winter in the sunny south.
His recovery is going to be a bit of a long one.
But doctors and the insurance company say he's now fit to travel back to Canada aboard a medical evacuation flight. Rice has insurance coverage. For several days, there's been no Ontario hospital willing to accept him here, according to his daughter.
Yeah, it is disappointing.
His condition is a little better, says Emma, who flew from Canada to be at her dad's side.
I've been sleeping in his room with him, and staying at the hospital.
When a Canadian is sick or injured outside the country, an expert told Global News hospitals tend to give beds to patients waiting for care in emergency rooms over Canadians away from home.
What's very disappointing is the lack of priority to getting Canadians back home that are overseas.
Lawyer Michael Korstein's family know this firsthand. An elderly family member was just flown back to Toronto this week from outside the country for brain surgery. It took longer than expected.
Someone's ill overseas, get them flown back, get them to a hospital. It shouldn't take more than a couple of days.
He can't speak, so it's hard for him to communicate. I don't know how someone would cope through this if you did not have anyone that could come be with you or advocate for you.
Canadians have faced these kinds of delays for years, but health experts say it's getting worse.
It should be addressed. It has to be addressed.
Ontario's Ministry of Health told us if a patient needs a critical care bed, one will be made available. But just when will that happen so that Rice can fly home? That's something the family would like to know. Tracy.
Sean O'Shea reporting in Toronto. Thanks, Sean. Well, multiple provinces across Canada are reporting elevated cases of deadly and invasive strep A in 2024. A recent cluster in the Maritimes has families pushing for better awareness across the country in hopes of avoiding another record year like the one experienced in 2023. Heidi Petracek reports.
Oh, what? How did you do that? Castellan Cameron almost died last year after developing invasive Group A streptococcus, or IGAS.
If I had hesitated one more day, my son wouldn't be here, and they said that.
Overnight, the 3-year-old's fever turned into sepsis and a month-long hospital stay.
They lost the ability to walk. So we had to reteach him how to walk.
The Public Health Agency of Canada says confirmed cases in 2023 have reached a new high at more than 5,200. And BC, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia are all reporting elevated numbers this year.
We thought she would get better and come home.
Sammy Ann Metaross's mother and stepfather died of the aggressive illness within hours of each other in a Nova Scotia hospital February 25th. They feel physicians didn't act quickly enough and there isn't enough awareness.
I don't think they realized how serious it was either. Not that they didn't do what they could for the knowledge that they had, but I just don't think the knowledge was out there enough.
Symptoms progress rapidly and include persistent high fever, severe pain, swelling and redness, a quickly spreading rash, dizziness and confusion, and nausea and or vomiting. Antibiotics can treat eye gas. Health officials stress deaths are rare, but in January, the BC Centre for Disease Control said invasive group A strep killed 4 children, and eye gas killed 10 people in Nova Scotia the first 2 months of this year, including 6-year-old Jaden Davis.
The increase in kids is higher than the increase in adults.
Dr. Alison McGeer says it's largely unknown why some cases turn deadly, and best prevention would be a vaccine, if there was one.
It's been harder to make a vaccine, and we're not, I don't think, going to be able to solve this problem until we get vaccines for group A strep.
If you're concerned, go to the hospital.
Advice from families and medical experts alike. The infection's rapidly progressing symptoms mean minutes count. Heidi Petrojek, Global News, Halifax.
Iran's aggression against Israel. Coming up, the former Prime Minister of Israel on the potential response. Returning now to the crisis in the Middle East. The region is a tinderbox, and tonight's drone attacks could spiral out of control. Mercedes Stephenson spoke with former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett on what's at stake. She joins us now from Ottawa with more. Mercedes.
Tracy, the world is on edge regarding possible retaliation from Iran following Israel's attack on an Iranian consulate in Syria. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett tells me on the West Block that Israel is prepared for what might come, but says that would be a mistake for Tehran.
Well, actually, it would be detrimental to Iran because Iran, until now, has enjoyed fighting a war, a one-sided war. So we're on a boxing ring, and one side is hitting the other, and the other is not responding, being Iran hitting Israel. If they directly attack Israel, clearly Israel will retaliate.
Bennett says the time may be coming for Israel to make the decision to hit Iranian territory.
You mentioned the head of the octopus being in Tehran, and obviously it's very rare to strike there directly. I am interested to know if you think that's what the Israeli government should be doing.
If we are attacked, and we are already being attacked by the proxies, I definitely think that that Iran should directly pay the price into Iran. I also think that the free world should engage in an ongoing soft campaign to collapse the Iranian regime.
Canada's shifting stance on the Israel-Hamas conflict is another topic we'll discuss in the interview, and it's something that Bennett didn't mince his words on.
I'm disappointed. I think Canada, taking a negative stance both in the terminology and the embargo and refunding UNRWA. We expect friends to be with us, not when it's easy, but when it's tough.
We'll also discuss the suffering in Gaza and international criticism of Israel's ongoing war on Hamas. And we'll bring in our expert panel to break down Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's testimony at the foreign interference inquiry this past week, as well as a look at the potential political fallout. Tracy?
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa for us. Thank you. And you can hear more from the former Israeli Prime Minister tomorrow morning on the West Block, right here on Global. Ahead, the urgent calls to help Indigenous communities brace for a busy wildfire season. Some Indigenous communities are sounding the alarm as the wildfire season gets underway. On Wednesday, the federal government announced new funding to help the 48 First Nations in Alberta hire emergency management coordinators. But with wildfires already sparking evacuation orders, several chiefs tell Global News that the announcement is both too little and too late. Heather Express reports.
It may be early April, but in north central Alberta, it's so dry that on Tuesday, a grass fire quickly got out of control. The blaze forced the evacuation of several homes on the Enoch Cree First Nation.
We experienced a brush fire that quickly escalated with the wind, and seeing that it's so dry out, and we are in a stage 4 drought as well, that it's not helping anybody.
By the evening, residents were allowed to return home, but the early season scare is likely a sign of things to come. Forecasters are expecting another difficult season after a record-breaking year. Disproportionately impacted by wildfires, 2023 saw 161 fires threaten Indigenous communities. 90 First Nations faced evacuation orders.
First Nations are on the front lines of the climate disaster related to climate change, and nearly 80% of communities are at risk of effects due to wildfire.
It's why this week the federal government committed to fund emergency coordinator positions for every Alberta First Nation.
It's a great start, in my opinion, but it's a little too late after the fact. I think this should have been done initially last year instead of last minute.
Further to the north, the chief of the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation agrees. Last May, the more than 800 people of Fort Chippewa were forced from their homes. With no summer road access, the community had to be evacuated by air over 3 anxious days. Heading into another season, Chief Alan Adams says the community is still missing critical resources to protect homes from advancing flames, and its plan for a second evacuation route via the Athabasca River remains unfunded.
It's ironic that we have to endure the fire seasons that are coming before us without a proper plan in place, even though we went through this before.
A sense of deja vu and dread, with another hot and dry summer fast approaching. Heather West, Global News, Calgary.
A little more than gold. Next, which Olympic event is now adding a cash prize to the top of the podium? Well, we are just months away from the Summer Olympics in Paris, when athletes from around the world will be vying for Olympic glory and gold. Usually, those are the only prizes any victorious Olympian would be walking away with. But one Olympic sport will soon be raising the stakes by putting money on the table. Mike Drolet explains the historic change.
For the first time in 128 years, the Olympic gold medal will be worth a little bit more, but only in track and field.
Athletics president and two-time gold medalist Sebastian Coe argued it was long overdue to award athletes like marathon legend Eliud Kipchoge for growing their sport.
I don't run because of money, but I run because I want to perform. Then the other things will come.
This year, that could be worth $50,000. The money, though, will come directly from the Athletics Federation, not the IOC, leaving it up to the federations of every other sport to decide if they want to follow suit.
I think what Coe did is a good thing for pushing this agenda and making this a discussion.
From the earliest days of the Olympics, the term amateur was considered sacrosanct. When it was discovered 1912 medalist Jim Thorpe was earning $25 a week playing minor league baseball, he was stripped of his medals. Any benefit from sport was deemed illegal.
It was, it was under the table if you got a prize, like a new chain or something like that, handlebars. And now you've got Timbits, shirts on 5-year-olds running around playing soccer and advertising for a corporation. And that, again, would have been completely unheard of.
The rules made life difficult for athletes like Angela Schneider, who, before winning silver at the 1984 Games, struggled to put food on her table and afford the equipment to compete.
I can't tell you how poor we were. I mean, I came from a farm. So the Rodney Legion paid for my Olympic ore. The town community rallied to pay for what was then a brand new technology, the carbon fiber ore. I have that ore hanging in my home. They bought it for me so I could go to the Olympics.
The shift away from amateur happened in 1986, when the IOC removed the word from its charter to allow the U.S. Dream Team to compete. But that was almost 40 years ago. Some countries, including Canada, have since awarded cash prizes to its athletes. But the question now is, should all Olympic athletes, regardless of sport or country, get paid to compete? Mike Trollet, Global News, Toronto.
Well, that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Tracy Tong. Tonight's Your Canada is Brantford, Ontario. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Carolyn Jarvis will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.
This is Asia Now.
It's 9 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 6:30 in New Delhi and 8 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Ilafia Silveraji. Headlines this hour. A major escalation in the Middle East. Iran has launched scores of missiles and drones at Israel, and the swarm attack comes nearly 2 weeks after Israel killed the top Iranian commander in Damascus. The U.S. vows ironclad support for Israel against attacks from Iran. President Joe Biden is back at the White House for crisis talks after cutting short a weekend trip to Delaware. And Hamas rejects Israel's ceasefire proposal. The group says it will stick to its main demands for a permanent end to fighting. Iran's mission to the United Nations says that following the launch of drones and missiles toward Israel, Tehran now considers that the retaliatory action for an attack on its diplomatic compound in Damascus to be concluded. But it adds that should the Israeli regime make another mistake, Iran's response will be considerably more severe. It also warns the US to stay away. Loud explosions and sirens were heard in several areas, including in Jerusalem, and interceptions were also seen in the sky. There has been no indication that Iran's missiles have struck Israel. The Israeli military says more than 200 missiles and drones were fired so far, some of which have been shot down over Syria and Jordan, with assistance from the US and the UK.
Iran fired a massive swarm over 200 killer drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles towards the state of Israel. Together with our allies and partners across the region, we are operating at this very moment to defend Israel from Iran's attack. So far, we have intercepted a vast majority of incoming missiles. A number of Iranian missiles fell inside Israeli territory, causing minor damage to a military base with no casualties.
The Israeli army adds that the strikes mark a severe and dangerous escalation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is currently convening his war cabinet.
אזרחי ישראל, בשנים האחרונות, וביתר שאת בשבועות האחרונים, ישראל נערכת לאפשרות של תקיפה ישירה מאיראן. מערכות ההגנה שלנו פרוסות. אנחנו ערוכים לכל תרחיש, הן בהגנה והן בהתקפה. מדינת ישראל חזקה, צה"ל חזק, הציבור חזק.
Iranian state media has said that the attack was in retaliation for the Israeli strike on an Iranian consular building this month in Damascus, Syria. 7 people, including 2 senior members of the nation's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, were killed. And shortly after Iran's retaliatory strike, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei made the statement in a post on X. And in a video, he stated that the Israeli regime is all malice, evil, and error. According to Iran's Mehr news agency, the country's defense minister, Mohammad Reza Ashtiani, says that any nation that opens its airspace or ground to Israel for attacking Iran will receive Tehran's decisive response. A number of countries in the region have closed their airspace in the wake of the attack, and they are Israel, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon. Reuters, citing army sources, reports that Syria has put its Russian-made Panzer ground-to-air defense systems on high alert around the capital, Damascus, and major bases. US President Joe Biden has promised Washington's, quote, ironclad support for Israel against Iranian attacks. He posted on social media platform X after an urgent meeting with his top security officials. Caroline Malone in Washington, D.C. has more on how the White House and Iran are reacting.
But crucially, the US had already said and has reiterated today that it will support Israel and make sure that they are capable of this defense in what they had expected to be an attack from Iran for a number of days. Let me read to you what we heard from the Pentagon specifically, that the US has reiterated unwavering support for Israel's defense, and that Secretary Austin made it clear that Israel could count on full US support to defend Israel against any attack by Iran. The White House has said that President Biden's made it clear that the support for Israeli security is ironclad. So this is important to distinguish, though, that actually the US has also said it didn't know before Israel carried out its attack on the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus. But despite all of this, Israel is standing strong, with its ally and saying that it will do what's needed for defense here. Well, this Iran attack is unprecedented. It's the first time we've seen this type of major attack coming from Iran into Israeli territory. But we're yet to see really how this is going to play out, how bad this situation will be. We've also heard from the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations, who said this is the end of this stage of a retaliatory attack against Israel. It's warned Israel against retaliating again. It's also said that the US shouldn't get involved because this is between Israel and Iran. But there are already many groups in the region that have become involved, and we've actually had new attacks from Hezbollah, which is an Iran-backed group in Lebanon, into occupied territories of Israel. We've also had a Houthi attack, we believe, that's happened in the Strait of Hormuz. So there have already been a number of groups that have been involved here. So really it is a question of how bad these attacks are in Israel before we can see if this even escalates even more.
Iran will need to try and bypass Israel's formidable air defenses, and the most active and well-known of Israel's air defenses is Iron Dome, which has intercepted thousands of rockets fired by Palestinian militants in Gaza since 2011. Now head to our YouTube channel for this explainer. Apart from the Iron Dome, Israel has a medium to long-range interceptor known as David's Sling. It also has the Arrow defense system, one which developers say can intercept missiles fired from up to 2,400 kilometers away, and it can do so above Earth's atmosphere. Meantime, Hamas says it has submitted its response to mediators on the advancement of a truce deal with Israel. The group is sticking to its main demands and insisting that any agreement must end the war. And these prerequisites include a permanent ceasefire, the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, and the return of the displaced to their areas of residence. Now, Hamas says it's also ready to conclude a prisoner exchange deal with Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has opposed a permanent ceasefire and vowed to send ground troops into Rafah despite a widespread announcement. And he said his administration is united in rejecting what he termed as baseless demands from the group. The top U.S. diplomat for East Asia, Daniel Crittenbrink, is visiting China today. And the U.S. State Department says the trip comes as part of ongoing efforts to maintain open lines of communication and responsibly manage competition. It's just days after a trilateral summit where leaders of the U.S., Japan, and Philippines have focused on China's moves in the South China Sea. The Philippines and China had several maritime run-ins that included the use of water cannon centering on the second Thomas Shoal. China claims almost the whole of South China Sea. Their territorial claims overlap with exclusive economic zones of neighboring nations. Coming up on Asia Now, Australian police rule out terrorism in the fatal knife attack at a shopping centre in Sydney. And later, Ukraine says the situation on its eastern territory has worsened significantly as Russia steps up attacks.
Women taking matters into their own hands. 就选了一个学历比较高的，然后会4国语言。Young people challenging long-held norms.
我跟我太太，我们就是三无青年，无房贷、无车贷、无后贷。
And efforts to turn the tide.
没有我的话，可能2个年纪老的老人老去之后就突然就消失了。
How China's changing demographic structure is impacting its society. Wednesday on CNA.
Seeing my parents working so hard, it actually wasn't in my mind to take over this book business.
看你们想写说，因为你们是作者 author， 这是你们的书。
Organizing events. Welcome to this bilingual storytelling by Auntie Suyen. We hope that Ras Basah complex will start capturing the attention of people around and they'll start coming here again.
你是要颜体还是流体？
都要。我从来没有那个观念，一定儿子要跟我走一条路。
下个礼拜我就要开始去拍一下那个现场直播。
我要他自己心甘情愿来走。
我们来试一下，真的可以洗得掉吗？然后这个白棉布我就去洗。拍摄我觉得有点尴尬，下一次你看。
Watch an unfinished portrait, Ras Basah Complex, on demand at CNA.Asia.
10 years ago, a pact ended hostilities between the Philippines government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The peace is fragile.
All hell can break loose because of elections.
Will unmet promises derail the peace process?
Hindi maglabas yung mga promises ng government. Hindi basta-basta dito na nila.
Masabi commander nila at mag-experience pa rin ha. Pero maghintay muna tayo.
Insight, Thursday on CNA.
Welcome back. Now, 6 people have been killed in a stabbing attack at a shopping centre in Sydney. At least 9 others were injured in the assault, including a 9-month-old baby. The assailant has been shot dead by the police, and authorities do not believe the incident is terror-related. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called the attack a horrific act of violence.
Today, Bondi Junction was a scene of shocking violence, but it was also witness to the humanity and the heroism of our fellow Australians. Our brave police, our first responders, and of course everyday people who could never have imagined that they would face such a moment. And some of the footage is quite extraordinary. Staff for whom this should have been a normal shift, shoppers peacefully going about their lives, and yet for these Australians their first instinct in the face of danger was to help someone else. That is what we hold on to tonight as Australians. That's confirmation of who we are, brave, strong, together.
The incident took place around 3:20 p.m. local time on Saturday afternoon. The assailant reportedly began attacking people at random, and several posts on social media showed crowds fleeing the busy mall and police cars and emergency services rushing to the scene.
It looked like that he was on a killing spree on this side, because when we come downstairs, there was another two bodies near the wedding shop inside. It looked like they must have been stabbed. Just inside, one looked like a female and a male, but I don't have any more in the shop.
Baby in the stretcher going into the ambulance, and now I know it's a 9-month-old with a bandage in the arm and in the belly.
I didn't see him properly. I was running, but it was insane. It was insanity. I wasn't expecting it.
Daniel Robertson tells us more about how the public has reacted to the incident.
People here really are still in disbelief. This usually peaceful area turned into chaos when hundreds of people were evacuated from this shopping centre after hearing shots and screams. People here are still trying to come to terms with what happened, and while people are awaiting more information of what has occurred, many say that their thoughts tonight are with the victims and their families. We have also heard from the Prime Minister, who did call this a horrific act of violence, and he sent his condolences to the victims in this attack. But as we wait for more answers, as this city waits for more answers from authorities and more details, people say their thoughts are with those who were a victim in this attack and their families, as well as all those who are in hospital tonight receiving treatment.
The Thailand's Prime Minister Sethar Thavisin has instructed the military to secure the border with Myanmar and ensure army aircraft from the neighbouring country do not violate Thai airspace. He adds that the government is prepared to deal with the surge of Myanmar citizens fleeing into Thailand as fighting intensifies there. CNA's Mei Wong has the details.
Disrupted cross-border trade, safety of Thai citizens, and potentially an influx of tens of thousands of Myanmar refugees that could be crossing from Myanmar into Thailand over here. Now, these are just some of the issues that Thailand is concerned about, especially after Myanmar Ethnic Army and resistance forces captured the bordering town of Myawaddy on Wednesday. Now, leading up to this capture, loud explosions and gunshots inside Myawaddy could be heard clearly and frequently here in Thailand's Masot city. The resistance taking control of Myawaddy from the Myanmar coup regime even prompted Thailand's Foreign Minister Panpri Pahitpanakon to make a day trip to Masot to assess the situation on Friday.
เป็นเรื่องภายในซึ่งประเทศไทยไม่สามารถที่จะเข้าไปแทรกแซงกิจการภายในของเมียนมาได้นะครับอย่างไรก็ตามเนี่ยสถานการณ์ที่เกิดขึ้นในเมียนมาเนี่ยก็ไม่มีใครสบายใจประเทศไทยเนี่ยก็ได้ส่งข้อความไปบอกทางรัฐบาลเมียนมาเนี่ยหลายครั้งแล้วนะครับแล้วในขณะเดียวกันอาเซียนก็ได้มีข้อความไปแล้วนะครับแต่ในเวลานี้เนี่ยทางรัฐบาลไทยยังมีความชัดเจนว่าไม่ว่าใครก็ตามที่
Israel stands down its alert, signalling the end of an unprecedented Iranian attack that saw hundreds of drones and missiles fired as part of a long-anticipated reprisal attack for strikes on its Damascus consulate. The IDF said a small number of hits were identified, including on a military base, where there was minor damage. Hamas rejects an Israeli ceasefire deal as the relentless onslaught of the Gaza Strip continues. Violence also flaring in the occupied West Bank as Jewish settlers sought revenge for the killing of a teenage shepherd boy. Welcome to the France 24 Newsroom, I'm Alexander Orcott. A top story this hour, Israel has requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to condemn an Iranian attack that saw hundreds of drones and missiles fired towards it. That's expected to be held at 4 p.m. local time in New York. It now appears to be over the attack, and residents have been told they no longer need to seek shelter. The attack came as a retaliation for a strike on Iran's consulate in the Syrian capital 2 weeks ago. Tehran blames Israel, which is neither confirmed.
To our viewers, you're seeing some of this video right now. These are some of the projectiles, some of them drones.
Across national borders. Talking Europe takes you to the heart of the EU election campaign.
Talking Europe on France 24 and France24.com.
Israel stands down its alert, signalling the end of an unprecedented Iranian attack that saw hundreds of drones and missiles fired as part of a long-anticipated reprisal attack for strikes on its Damascus consulate. The IDF said a small number of hits were identified, including on a military base, where there was minor damage. Hamas rejects an Israeli ceasefire deal as the relentless onslaught of the Gaza Strip continues. Violence also flaring in the occupied West Bank as Jewish settlers sought revenge for the killing of a teenage shepherd boy. Welcome to the France 24 Newsroom, I'm Alexander Orcott. A top story this hour, Israel has requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to condemn an Iranian attack that saw hundreds of drones and missiles fired towards it. That's expected to be held at 4 p.m. local time in New York. It now appears to be over the attack, and residents have been told they no longer need to seek shelter. The attack came as a retaliation for a strike on Iran's consulate in the Syrian capital 2 weeks ago. Tehran blames Israel, which has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility. The majority of the projectiles were intercepted by Israel's own defense forces with help from the US, UK and Jordan. An IDF spokesman gave this update.
Tonight, Iran launched a large-scale coordinated attack on Israel. The regime in Iran fired a massive swarm over 200 killer drones, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles towards the state of Israel. Together with our allies and partners across the region, we are operating at this very moment to defend Israel from Iran's attack. So far, we have intercepted the vast majority of incoming missiles by Israeli systems. So far, we have intercepted and are continuing to intercept dozens of attack drones as well as cruise missiles and ballistic missiles outside of Israel's border. A number of Iranian missiles fell inside Israeli territory, causing minor damage to a military base with no casualties. Only one little girl has been hurt, and we hope she will be well. The Iranian attack is ongoing. Our plans are in the air. Tonight, wide-scale attack by Iran is a major escalation. Together with our allies and partners, we are operating at full force to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel. We will continue to fulfill this mission.
And as those rockets were still arriving towards Israel, we earlier spoke to the ABC correspondent Jordana Miller, who joined us from Jerusalem, where some of the first explosions were heard. She gave us this update.
Many people did not believe that Jerusalem would come under attack, but it's exactly what happened. Of course, it was one of many places, but I'm here in the capital, and I grabbed my 2 young children, and we went running to our safe room, and we heard a lot of the interceptions. It's been really a kind of surreal night, to be honest. I mean, we have to remember this is a historic night. Iran has never directly attacked Israel, and it did it in quite a significant scale. The initial estimates are somewhere between 350 to 450 drones and 150 ballistic and cruise missiles. So that's quite significant. And Israel was able, with the United States and other partners of Britain and Jordan, for example, to shoot down most of that barrage. We're not done with this night. Israel anticipates there will be another wave of drone attacks, and possibly by some of the. We're not sure if it's going to come from Iran, the next wave of attacks, or if it'll come from the Houthis or Hezbollah, right? Some of the proxies. So, the next thing we're all going to be watching and reporting on is how Israel responds.
Looking over now to Iran itself, hundreds of hardline supporters of the regime have been celebrating in Tehran's Palestine Square, waving flags and chanting against Israel and America. Other crowds seen gathering outside the British embassy. Iranian proxies in the region have attacked Israel in the past, but this is the first ever direct assault from Iran against Israel, despite decades of tensions dating back to the Islamic Revolution 45 years ago. US President Joe Biden rushed back from a weekend getaway in Delaware to consult with his top security advisors in the White House Situation Room. He's reaffirmed his ironclad support for Prime Minister Netanyahu and set to convene a G7 meeting for a coordinated response against Iran. Well, for more on Biden's actions as the attacks were occurring, here's our Washington correspondent Fraser Jackson.
US President Joe Biden cut his weekend short to come back to the White House to hold a meeting with his national security team as they discussed the Iranian attack on Israel. At that meeting was Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, as well as the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, with Kamala Harris and others also on the call. Afterwards, Joe Biden released a picture of the meeting on Twitter and said, quote, "Our commitment to Israel's security against threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad." That is something that we saw over the last few days as the US moved more assets into the area to help Israel deal with any potential threat from Iran. And we have seen US jets, along with Jordanian jets, shoot down dozens of drones and also ground-to-ground missiles that were fired from Iran in Israel's direction as well. Now, Iran's mission to the UN has said that that combination of drones and the missiles, the dozens of ground-to-ground missiles that we saw as well, is the extent of Iran's response. It said the matter can be deemed concluded. However, should the Israeli regime make another mistake, Iran's response will be considerably more severe. It also warns the US to stay out of this conflict between Israel and Iran, saying, like it did a few days ago, that the US could face more attacks on its troops in the region, something that has stopped after the US itself had retaliatory strikes just a few months ago.
That's Fraser Jackson reporting from Washington. Now, Iran's reprisal attack had been expected for several days, and throughout Saturday, tensions continued to mount. To take a look back at this is Cami Knight.
Israeli officials have been preparing for an attack from Iran for days. As tensions reach new highs, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country is ready.
Israeli citizens. In recent years, and even more so in recent weeks, Israel has been preparing for the possibility of a direct attack from Iran. Our defense systems are deployed and we're prepared for any scenario, both in defense and attack.
Officials have announced a series of measures to protect citizens, including the closure of schools. Earlier on Saturday, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards seized an Israel-bound container ship in the Strait of Hormuz, pointing towards an escalation in hostilities. The seizure came after Iran vowed retaliation for a suspected Israeli strike on its consulate in Damascus on April 1st, an attack that killed 16 people, including 2 senior Iranian generals. Since then, the rest of the world has also been on high alert, US President Joe Biden even cutting a weekend trip short on Saturday to consult with his national security team in Washington. The White House says it will stand by Israel. In the meantime, countries including Iraq and Israel have temporarily closed their airspace.
As we saw in that report, before the launch of the drones, tensions had already ratcheted when Iran's Revolutionary Guards seized a container ship in the Strait of Hormuz it claimed was linked to Israel. State-run Islamic Republic news agency said Special Forces unit had carried out the attack. For more on this, here's Jenny Shin.
This video shared on social media claims to show Iranian Revolutionary Guards seizing an Israel-bound container ship in the Strait of Hormuz, a ship managed by Zodiac, a company belonging to an Israeli billionaire. Since the seizure was announced, the tone has gone up a notch between Tel Aviv and Tehran.
Iran will bear the consequences for choosing to escalate the situation any further. Israel is on high alert. We have increased our readiness to protect Israel from further Iranian aggression. We are also prepared to respond.
The warning comes after Iran vowed retaliation for a suspected Israeli strike on its consulate in Damascus on the 1st of April, an attack that killed 16 people, including 2 senior Iranian generals.
The evil regime has made a terrible mistake. It must be punished, and will be.
Threats taken seriously by Israel and its ally the United States. Washington is sending more troops to the troubled region on Saturday as President Joe Biden warns Tehran against carrying out its threats.
Hamas has meanwhile rejected an Israeli ceasefire proposal offered earlier, standing by its demands that any deal must see an end to the war and include a full withdrawal of Israeli forces, the return of displaced people to their homes, and the intensification of aid, as well as the start of reconstruction. While the Islamist group sticks to its guns, leading to a deadlock in the talks, the Palestinian people in Gaza suffer from the relentless Israeli onslaught, now into its 7th month.
Residents of the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza say the Israeli army gave them a warning to evacuate. An hour later, airstrikes hit the area.
There is a lot of destruction. This is the second time we've been bombed. I barely escaped death last time. I have absolutely nothing left.
The Israeli army says it struck dozens of targets in Gaza on Friday. This included the Meghazi refugee camp, which also has been struck multiple times in the past few months. In Deir al-Balah, the Israeli army ordered that a mosque be evacuated before reducing it to rubble in minutes. To escape the destruction, many Palestinians have fled to southern Gaza, where more than 1.4 million people are now seeking shelter. This has caused deep difficulties for pregnant women living in refugee camps.
I gave birth under difficult circumstances. The ambulance was late and I almost had to give birth in the street. I'm facing great difficulty in providing milk. The water here is not clean and contains germs, so I'm always afraid he will contract diseases.
Local doctors say the rate of miscarriages among pregnant women has increased due to the conflict, as have incidences of premature birth.
There's been an uptick of violence in the occupied West Bank, meanwhile, where Jewish settlers went on an angry rampage following the death of a teenage shepherd boy. The Israeli army found the body of 14-year-old Benjamin Ashimir a day after he went missing while tending to his flock of sheep. Palestinian Health Ministry said 17-year-old Omar Hamed was shot dead by settlers during the subsequent violence, and at least 20 other Palestinians were wounded.
Blood-stained bedsheets and burnt vehicles. The aftermath of a violent manhunt in the occupied West Bank after the disappearance of a 14-year-old Israeli boy near Ramallah. At least one Palestinian man was killed in the raid and 2 dozens wounded.
They burnt cars and tried to burn the houses too. They damaged everything they could, including the water tanks, leaving nothing unharmed. It lasted between 2 to 3 hours, then they started moving on to other houses towards the west. They burnt houses, vehicles, and they took sheep as well.
The attacks escalated in several villages across the occupied Palestinian territory, even after the IDF confirmed the body of the teenager had been found on Saturday. The clashes are the latest violence in the West Bank, where over 450 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since the Hamas-led attack on October 7th. The Israeli military says it will bolster its forces in the area and is now carrying out a search to find the teenager's killers.
That's where we end this edition. Stay tuned for more world news on France 24.
With thousands killed and over 8 million people displaced, Sudan's civil war enters its one-year mark with no end in sight. Electoral campaigning begins in Togo for the country's legislative and regional elections. It has now gone 365 days of the war in Sudan between the country's military, chaired by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the notorious Rapid Support Forces, commanded by General Mohamed Hamdan Daglo. The war has killed thousands and forced 8 million people to flee their homes, according to the UN.
Another almost 2 million have gone over the borders and outside the region, which also has a destabilizing effect on the neighboring countries. The food security situation is our biggest concern right now.
The precarious conditions in the country do not just concern deaths and famine. Experts have also highlighted the rising spate of gender-based violence and other abuses.
Atrocities, human rights abuses, breaches of international humanitarian law, gender-based violence is rampant. These are the hallmarks of this conflict, and as you mentioned, we've seen them before in Sudan. What's different, I think, is a bit of the apathy from the international community to intervene and to bring pressure on the parties to come to a ceasefire.
The coup and the war were a major blow to Sudanese hopes for democratic rule after decades of military and Islamist rule that turns the Horn of Africa nation into a pariah state for decades.
We know we have the wherewithal to do something about it if we were given both the resources and the access, and yet we don't have them. This is not going to be a story that many Sudanese are going to want to tell their children, nor should it be something the world wants to recount.
UN experts said in a report to the UN Security Council earlier this year that Darfur is experiencing its worst violence since 2005. Campaigns for the legislative and regional elections have begun in Togo. Starting from Saturday, April 13, the campaigns will last for 2 weeks before the vote on April 29. Although these are the first regional elections in the country's history, it is the legislative elections that are attracting the most attention. It comes since the surprise adoption of the new constitution by the country's MPs on March 25. Following the vote, which shifts the country from a presidential to a parliamentary system, Togo's head of state, Faure Gnassingbe, attempted to appease the population by delaying the promulgation of the text and requesting a second reading in the National Assembly. The opposition avowed protest and resistance. Amid fears of an imminent attack, Israel has warned Iran not to attack its soil. Military spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Agari said in a video statement released on Saturday that the Jewish state was on high alert. The latest warning comes as tension of an all-out Middle East war heightens over Israel's actions in Gaza.
Iran will bear the consequences for choosing to escalate the situation any further. Israel is on high alert. We have increased our readiness to protect Israel from further Iranian aggression. We are also prepared to respond.
Israel has been bracing for a possible Iranian attack since an airstrike killed 2 Iranian generals in the Syrian capital of Damascus last week. Iran has blamed Israel for the airstrike and vowed revenge.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Goodman. Have a good life.